Hi, this is Glenda, and I'm making today a gingerbread mini house soap. This is my recipe for it, and if you're interested, I'm going to include a link to it in the description box below. For fragrance, I will be using Hansel and Gretel's house like I did on my previous gingerbread house soaps. The last time that I used this fragrance, it did not discolor as dark as I thought it was going to, so this year I will be using Fire Cider Mica to help it get there. I have warmed up the oils to 118 Fahrenheit or 48 Celsius, and I'm going to add the mica straight to the oils since everything is going to be a solid color. I will be putting a couple teaspoons of this into the oil, and I'm going to blend it to make sure it's evenly distributed. I will also be adding EDTA as a chelator since this soap is going to be brown just to reduce soap scum in hard water areas like it is where I live. I stepped away for a little bit, and when I came back I took the temperature again to make sure it was still okay, and it was at 41 Celsius I believe, or 107 Fahrenheit, so still good. So now I'm going to measure my light water. This is just a combination of sodium hydroxide and distilled water, which I did a multi-batch of it, and I'm just going to measure out what I need for this recipe. The light water solution is at room temperature. That this date it's equal to 79 Fahrenheit or 25 Celsius for me. Oh, and this is the scraper that I will be using. It's just like an inverted V shape, and I made it with a plastic corrugated board that I cut, and then I tape it just to make sure there is no holes at the bottom where the soap batter can go into. Once I started blending with a stick blender, I did it in intervals of about 10 seconds and then alternated it with stirring, and this took quite a while. I've noticed that when I use a 40% light to water concentration solution, it takes a while to reach emulsion. It took about 4 minutes, I'll say, of alternating between stirring and blending. I wanted this to reach emulsion phase so that I could add the fragrance. The fragrance tends to accelerate, so I did not want it to bring it to trace just yet. When I add the mica to the oils, I usually have a hard time telling when the mix has reached emulsion or trace because it seems it has reached it sooner than it actually does. After about 7 minutes, the soap had reached a consistency thick enough for me to start scraping away. I must warn you that what happens next is going to be very messy. If seeing messy soap spaces is something that makes you squirm, I suggest you skip ahead, and to do that, you can click on one of the chapters at the bottom in the description box. Basically, I'm trying to scrape away the shape of the roof of the gingerbread house, and because this is happening on top of the mold, it is messier than when you scrape inside a love mold. To be able to cut the soaps out of the 6x6 mold, I did have to lay it at an angle so that I could use the single wire cutter. It was a bit tricky, and perhaps I should have used my slab soap mold cutter instead. After cutting them, I did have to clean them up a little bit, mainly on the edges where there were some overhangs. For the decorations, I used a clay extruder to make this long rods with soap dough, and then I use a tissue blade to cut thin slices out of it. I made the soap for the soap roasting, which is the same recipe as the main soap except in less quantity, and for colorant I use titanium dioxide. My piping skills are not that good, so I'm just going to fast forward most of this. At the beginning it was easier, I will say, because of the consistency of the soap, but at some point my husband decided he was hungry Well, he didn't decide it was time for dinner, but I usually lose track of time when I'm making soup and I forget even about being hungry, or I ignore my hunger. However, since he wouldn't, I had to go downstairs, and when I came back, the soup frosting had hardened a lot and I was having a hard time pushing it out of the bag. So my last soaps are even worse than the first ones, but they still work out in the end. After doing the piping, I added the decorations that you saw earlier and also some extra ones that I had, and also some glitter on top to simulate snow. I'm gonna post a picture next of what they look after the discoloration of the fragrance so you can see what they look like. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.